Hi all, it's a real pleasure to be here. So, as you can get from the title, today I'll try to focus on a very specific point that starts from our everyday practice at Accurate and that deals with the importance of the good design of the aesthetic elements of a data representation. And just to set the expectation, I'm not going to deliver any lecture, and I'm not going to define any truth or universal truth on the topic. I'd just like to share why we are doing the things that we do, so what moves us and what moves me. I'd like to begin with 4 ideas that I'll try to elaborate then by showing some projects we did. To begin with, we think that in certain cases, the aesthetic aspects of a data visualization can be considered as important as the data itself in helping readers get interested about the topic and triggering their curiosity to explore more. We also think that aesthetic features can be considered not only as an ornamental attribute within a data-driven visual story. We think that we should, in some particular cases, allow for a visualization to take its shapes from a visual ideas you might have in the first place and not necessarily straight from the data. A beauty-driven image sometimes can be more effective than a data-driven one. Of course, this idea doesn't suggest to manipulate the information or to misrepresent a data set. And lastly, we think that a reader should be able to find the data visualization both intellectually compelling, rigorous data-wise, but also emotionally rich. So, taking a step back, we believe that the process of looking for new points of view on our reality, every day, in our everyday life, is really built on many important components. And one of the most central components of that process is the research for pleasing aesthetics, to drive interest and curiosity and to evoke wonder. And so, coming back to data visualization, a pure and beautiful visual can become an extremely powerful trigger to get people curious and willing to explore its content and the data analysis you perform. And this is why we like the idea of making people think, oh, that is beautiful and maybe even strange in the first place, and then hopefully to make them say, I want to know what this is about. But let's talk about that with examples. I'll start with a project that I've been showing a lot lately, but it helps making my point. It's a personal project, meaning that we didn't have any client. And the idea was to create, it's working, a visual anthology of 10 abstract painters' lives built on a simple, linear, and easy to be understand timeline format. And then our idea was really to visually steal from the style of the abstract painters, elements, and colors to represent their lives in artistic production. So we would have slightly different but still comparable timelines and symbols to visualize Matisse, Kandinsky, Picasso's, and so on, main categories of information according to their personal taste in style. And so we depicted a timeline for each painter, illustrating his artistic production, how words, training, and connection and influences on the bottom part of the visualization on the timeline, where we also depicted their masterpieces divided to categories according to the subject they represent, and visually highlighting the main colors and sizes of the paintings. But we also added some further information about his life, such as health-related events, health-related issues, habits, love affairs, and geography of his moves, always on the top of the timeline. And this to help people exploring stories and connection between the personal life and the artistic achievement of an artist. And so we really wanted to focus on these visual clues, reminding the painter's style, because we believe that it will resonate with people's minds a familiar feeling as a visual, beautiful reminder to the style they already know, and those inviting them hopefully to explore these pieces, to learn something and get lost in investigation. And we also dared a little bit more, graphically speaking, with one project last year. And to be honest, we were not so sure about the result, and we still don't know if we like it or not. But we won a Bronze Lion at the Cannes Festival for Advertising with the piece I'm going to show now, so maybe it's not bad after all. Okay, I know this can be super weird, and it is actually, but here is the story. McCann Group called us to help them with a project for their Italian client Fiorucci that sells, of course, cold cuts. And we've been asked to design a data visualization on the history of Italian corruption, some way graphically playing with the metaphor of salami. So the topic of corruption is because they focused all of the campaign for Fiorucci on that topic. And I'll show you now the video of the presentation. McCann did the video to the piece at Cannes Festival, and then I'll briefly explain the aesthetic choices for the visualization. And so the video that you are about to see, I don't really want to talk today about the campaign itself, which was kind of controversial also for the bold way they treated the topic, but I'll show you to give a basic context for this work.
What you are seeing here is something rather unique. It's the first scientific study of corruption in Italy. And surprisingly enough, it wasn't promoted by the government or a parliamentary commission. It was commissioned by Fiorucci, an Italian cold cuts brand. But how come? Here's the story. Italy is one of the most corrupt countries in Europe, and its corrupt politicians are said to eat pork because cold cuts were used in the past as bribes. That's why Fiorucci aired a 90-second mockumentary about corruption in Italy on the election day. The film was discussed on cult TV programs and major dailies and immediately spread online, reaching 2 million views in just a few days, thus becoming the most viewed Italian commercial on YouTube ever. With over 1.2 million euros of earned media, meaning a 3,700% return on investment, the campaign has become one of the most talked about in Italy. At this point, Fiorucci decided to pay back all the attention that journalists gave the campaign with a unique tool they could use in their work. It took 2 months for a team of sociologists, data analysts and designers to come up with the first scientific map of the history of corruption in Italy. Enjoy it, if you can.
Okay. Okay, the design of the visualization is built around an horizontal central timeline, and we have a upper part of the slice showing and comparing different kind of trends on corruption through time, and a lower part of the slice representing a selection of significant events related to corruption along the same timeline, and number paragraph explaining those events on the side with a legend below on how to read it all. So the top part allows to compare normalized indicators of economic nature to give an overview of the economical situation and trends during the time span, like we have the Italian GDP, the government debt, the fiscal pressure, the perception of corruption index, but also the trends of the citation on the terms corruption and bribery in the major Italian newspapers, through these sorts of filaments of fat, of course. And based on the same timeline, on the bottom part, we represented the 47 main corruption-related events that have characterized those 20 here, positioned horizontally according to the year they happened, and vertically divided 4 categories such as political events, health-related bad affairs, sport, and show, shaping those kind of curves, lines that you see. And each one of the events that we represented is depicted as a compound element exactly generated by the combination of the characteristic of the event, such as the central component of this element represent the territorial importance of the event, the top part is the prominent traits of the event, and the bottom part is the role covered by the people involved. And here we are with the overall again. And as I said, I don't know if we really like it, but we took it as a challenge. And I show this today because these weird aesthetics really drew a lot of attention on the topic. Of course, when you have several different layers of information, like in the pieces that I was showing before, it is, I wouldn't say easy, but easier maybe to design and produce articulated pieces, and those may be more unusual. But can we do something pleasant and visually compelling even when it comes to a small amount of information? This is one of our last projects in collaboration with Maria Popova, the curator of the Brain Pickings blog, and the illustrator Wendy McNaughton. And it explores the relationship between famous writers' productivity and the time they used to wake up, for whom we found the data in diaries or interviews. So really not a lot of data here. We also just had at the main prizes they've been awarded with and their life lengths to provide a further context for the readers. And so we had this simple idea of building the visualization completely around Wendy's portraits and using the 12 hours ring of the clock as a visual metaphor. So each author's portrait is hypothetically surrounded by a 12 hours clock with a visual mark to point out the time she or he used to wake up. And from this point of the clock, quantitative data on his or her productivity are visualized. And also we have colored auras surrounding the portraits, identifying in which prizes he or she won during the lifespan, and they're also rotated towards the wake-up time on the clock as well. And in the visuals, authors are ordered from the early birds to the late risers and laid out, creating a sort of progressive path, emphasizing the advancement of the clock. And yes, we have Bukowski waking up at noon, but who knows the time he used to go to bed. So, but for the overall visual style, we just try to follow the main idea of creating two separated but overlapping layers of information, so the author's beautiful illustrated portraits and the more quantitative data visualization display, trying to reach a visual flavor reminding actually superimposed paper layers, because they are writers after all. But anyway, this gave us the possibility to build a sort of unusual piece, if you think about it. Let's say simple, nothing is really complicated here. We really have a little amount of data. But so it's simple, but in a way exploratory, combining and trying to 100% integrate pure illustration and data visualization. But here we are. Can we eventually create an expected, pleasant visualization even when the aim is to build analytical interactive tools? And Santiago brilliantly showed that it's definitely possible, by the way. This is the last project I'm going to show today. It's called Next Atlas, and it is an interactive tool that lets users explore, monitor, and analyze a very rich curated archive of cultural and fashion trends through images. And it's the result of a few months of great teamwork of designers and engineers in the company. So, basically, Next Atlas allows brands to track trends, tags, and network relation between emerging trends, but also their location and diffusion, and browse through hundreds of visual examples. It is based on user-generated data, which are the images gathered through a mobile social game called iCoolHunt, that has tens of thousands of cool hunters around the world that take pictures of what they consider trending, and each picture then gets to get voted up and down by the community, determine its index of coolness. And we design and develop the analytical software and interface on top of these contents to let people interested in trends explore what's going on all over the world and export customized and beautiful reports. I'm not commenting the navigation of the video and what the software can do, because you can go play with the demo online. I'm rather telling you how we try to design it in a way that eventually could match the need to bridge the gap between data analysis and the pure seek for inspiration. So the main space focuses, of course, on the images display, but at the same time provides user the possibility to easily filter contents and trends by time, place, ranking, and relationship with other trends, and to perform customized queries. And all of the views that you're seeing share a particular feature, which is the color code that always indicates the level of coolness from light blue to bright yellow. And so since the images are a very, very important feature and they are the actual and real content, we really try to integrate them 100% within the views. So our data here is not only the metadata, it is mostly the images. Those, they are not used as an embellishment in the visual models, but they are really the core of the data visualization. So even here, I hope that first of all, you can find it beautiful. I assure that it's also functional, but I also hope that it can be this level of beauty of the experience itself that fosters people to explore and so to use it. And trying to wrap everything up a little bit, the idea behind this presentation was simply that to us, the charging, loading, and analytical representation with emotional investment can generate attention rather than being a distraction if it is done well. And of course, every time that you're trying to push forwards in terms of visual languages and aesthetics, you require a higher level of attention from your readers. And as a designer, you have to provide a very clear shortcuts and clues for people to understand how to play around with your design and how to dig into the data. Lots of how to read it for us. But all of this is not just done for the sake of building something new, but with the purpose of testing what's interesting and what is not, what people like and what they don't, what they understand and what they don't. And finally, what I talked about today is not supposed to be the only truth, but it is what is true for me now. This is a rapidly evolving field, especially in this very moment. And we've been recently trying to structure a couple of thoughts on where we believe that with Hakura, we can give our contribution to the evolution of the field. And as you've seen, our process is really made of trials and errors, but I truly believe that in order to push the boundaries of the disciplines, we have to take some risks. And our risk is our constant search for beauty, unconventional, but still beauty, to make people wonder, and wonder as a trigger to inquire. This is what we do and why we do it. Thank you.
Good. We can take 1 or 2 questions before we go to lunch.
No questions.
No questions.
I like it. No,
Just
we have
one up
one.
here.
Just wait a minute.
At the very end, you said something about the designers providing shortcuts for the audience because it requires a higher attention span. And do you have any thoughts just on advancing visual literacy generally? I mean, you're pushing the boundaries as designers, but the audience is not moving as quickly as you are. So how can you also help to?
Yeah, so I think that maybe in this kind of exploratory and new visual idea for visual languages, as a designer, you have to rely on something that is already familiar for the audiences, so maybe relying on a regular timeline or on a kind of format that can really help people immediately understand what you're talking about, and then maybe adding something new on top of that, trying to integrate familiar things that people can click with very rapidly with novelty, so that everything is visually maybe unexpected but still easy to be understood. This is just how we think about how we can do this. I also think that there is no a unique and universal answer to your question. It's made of tentatives. Okay, thank you.